Marcus Chen's hands moved with practiced efficiency across the gleaming surface of the lab counter, the microfiber cloth leaving no trace of his presence. The motion was meditative after 8 years: wipe, fold, move forward. Through the transparent wall of the research lab, holographic displays flickered with cardiovascular data, each projection rotating in three-dimensional space. The hospital hummed with its usual midnight rhythm, the soft pneumatic whoosh of auto-guided supply carts, the distant ping of patient monitoring systems, the occasional burst of hurried footsteps from residents responding to alerts on their neural interfaces. He paused outside Dr. Yuki Patel's lab. She was bent over a microscope, one of the few analog instruments remaining in St. Catherine's Medical Center, a relic she insisted on keeping. Her dark hair was twisted into a careless knot, secured with what looked like a pen. The blue glow from her workstation illuminated the curve of her neck. She glanced up, and her face transformed. Not the polite acknowledgement most doctors gave the maintenance staff, but genuine pleasure. She waved him in with an enthusiasm that made something in his chest tighten. "Marcus." Perfect timing. She gestured at the microscope. "Look at this arterial sample. Tell me what you see." He set down his cleaning cart and approached, aware of the contrast they made, her pristine white coat with its embedded status LED showing her credentials in soft amber light. His navy maintenance uniform with the faded St. Catherine's logo. He leaned over the eyepiece, and the familiar focus required to truly see pushed everything else away. The tissue sample revealed itself in layers. Inflammation, yes, but the pattern was wrong. The cell distribution suggested something genetic rather than environmental, endothelial inflammation, but the pattern's unusual. "Have you checked for familial hypercholesterolemia?" Yuki's eyes lit up. She pulled up a holographic chart with a gesture, patient data swimming in the air between them. "I knew you'd catch it. You see more in 30 seconds than most attendings see in 30 minutes. Their eyes met. Held. The moment stretched. Filled with 2 years of these late-night consultations, of professional boundaries that felt increasingly arbitrary. She was 34, an accomplished cardiologist with 3 published studies this year alone. He was 58, a janitor who brown-bagged turkey sandwiches and took the bus home. Marcus stepped back, breaking the spell. "I should finish my rounds. Big day tomorrow." Something flickered across her face, disappointment, quickly masked. "The Foundation Gala. Will you be there, serving champagne to people who won't see me?" He managed a wry smile. "Wouldn't miss it." The memory surfaced unbidden as he moved through the empty corridor, his cartwheels squeaking softly against the antiseptic floor. 8 years ago. Helena, fresh from medical school, standing in his studio apartment with acceptance letters clutched in her hand. Medical textbooks had lined every wall then, too, an odd collection for a hospital janitor, though no one who mattered ever visited to notice. "Dad, I got the cardiac surgery fellowship at St. Catherine's. The most prestigious program in the country." He'd felt such pride. "Your mother would be so proud. You've worked so hard. There's just one thing." Helena's voice had dropped, her gaze sliding away from his. "The other residents, they're asking about my family. These are people with parents who own hospitals, Dad. I need you to tell people you're retired. Not that you're a janitor." The words had hit like a physical blow. "Helena, I'm not ashamed of you. This is my career. My future. I need to make the right impression. Can't you understand that?" He'd understood perfectly. Understood that the values he and Sarah had tried to instill, integrity, compassion, seeing people rather than positions, had been overwritten by ambition and status anxiety. "Your mother and I raised you to value what matters." "I thought that meant integrity, not image." Helena's face had flushed with anger. "You gave up. You were a doctor, a brilliant one. Mom died because the system failed her, and instead of fighting to change it, you became this. You quit. The accusation still stung. I didn't quit medicine, Helena. I just found a different way to practice it. A way that lets me sleep at night. Well, your different way is embarrassing me. If you can't support my career, maybe it's better if we have some space. She'd left. The door had closed with a soft click that sounded like finality. Marcus shook off the memory and continued his rounds. The hospital at night revealed truths the day shift never saw. He noticed things. The way patient 407 always turned his call light on at 2:15 a.m. not because he needed anything, but because he was lonely and afraid. The way the new surgical resident's hands trembled after a difficult case. And she'd stand in the supply closet for 5 minutes just breathing. The way Dr. Brandon Whitmore, Helena's fiancé, had his prescriptions filled at 3 different pharmacies, a red flag no one else seemed to catch. 6 months ago, he'd started noticing Helena's symptoms. She'd tried to hide them, but a father knew. The way she gripped the nurse's station counter too hard. The slight stumble in her gait. The moments where she seemed to lose track of conversations mid-sentence. He'd wanted to reach out. Had drafted messages on his ancient phone a dozen times, deleting each one. She'd made her choice clear. Space. Distance. The humiliation of having a janitor father, 3 months ago. He'd overheard the nurses talking in the break room. He'd been emptying the trash, invisible as always. Did you see? Marcus Chen's daughter is getting married. He showed me the invitation even though he's not going. He keeps it in his locker. That's so sad. She's ashamed of him because he's a janitor, right? Meanwhile, he's the sweetest man. Always asks about my kids, helped my son with his biology homework. Dr. Patel says he's brilliant. Actually was a doctor before. Some tragedy made him quit. He'd left quickly, before they could see his face, but he'd also started watching Helena more carefully. Not stalking, just observing with the trained eye of someone who'd spent 20 years in emergency medicine. The symptoms were worsening. She'd seen specialists. He'd counted 22 different consultations from the scheduling system he had access to for room cleaning assignments. Neurologists. Cardiologists. Endocrinologists. Even a psychiatrist. Each appointment cost thousands. The tests were extensive. MRIs. Genetic panels. Full metabolic workups. Everything came back borderline or inconclusive, but Marcus saw the pattern no one else did. They were looking at the $1 million tests. He was looking at the patient. 2 weeks ago, he'd broken protocol. He'd accessed Helena's medical records during his shift. Technically a HIPAA violation. Technically grounds for termination. But she was his daughter. And something was killing her while the best doctor's money could buy found nothing. Dr. Patel had caught him in the records room, Helena's holographic chart rotating slowly in front of him. Marcus. Her voice had been gentle, concerned. You could lose your job. His hands had been shaking. She's my daughter. She won't talk to me, but I can still try to help. Yuki had sat beside him, close enough that he could smell her jasmine perfume. What do you see? He'd pointed at the timeline, the symptom progression, the lab values that were technically normal but trending wrong. Look. Symptoms started exactly when Brandon moved in. They worsen after breakfast. Her selenium levels are borderline high, within normal range. So no one flags it, but consistently trending up. It's chronic low-dose toxicity. Yuki had studied the charts, then turned to study him. You're not just a janitor, are you? The question had hung between them. Marcus had found himself telling her things he'd told no one at St. Catherine's. About being an ER doctor for 20 years. Rural medicine, where you learned to diagnose by observation because fancy tests weren't always available. About Sarah, Helena's mother, and her rare autoimmune condition. About how they'd taken her to the best hospitals, the most expensive specialists, who'd thrown every cutting-edge treatment at her without actually listening when she said something felt wrong with the medications. She died from a drug interaction a first-year resident should have caught. His voice had broken. I couldn't stay in that world. The arrogance. The way money determines care. The way doctors stop seeing patients as people. So I left. Took this job. Maybe I was running. But at least here, I can be useful without being complicit. Yuki had reached for his hand. The touch had been electric, bold, intimate, crossing a dozen unspoken boundaries. Her fingers had intertwined with his. You're the most remarkable man I've ever met. And for what it's worth, I think you practice more real medicine pushing that cart than most of us do in the OR. He'd looked at their joined hands, at the contrast of her smooth skin against his weathered fingers. Yuki, I'm 24 years older than you. I live in a studio apartment. I drive a car older than your residency. She'd squeezed his hand. And I've been half in love with you since you correctly diagnosed my patient with Whipple's disease from seeing him in the hallway for 3 seconds. Age, money, status, that's not what matters. You taught me that. They'd been inches apart. He'd seen the flecks of gold in her dark eyes, the slight parting of her lips. The moment had felt inevitable and impossible simultaneously. He'd pulled back reluctantly. I need to figure out how to save my daughter. Even if she doesn't want to be saved by me. Now, pushing his cart toward the cardiac wing, Marcus felt the weight of tomorrow pressing down. The Foundation Gala. Helena was giving the keynote address on excellence in modern medicine. He'd been assigned to work the event, serving drinks, clearing plates, being decorously invisible while his daughter celebrated everything he'd turned his back on. He'd also calculated, based on her symptom progression and the stress cascade a public speech would trigger, that she had approximately a 73% chance of collapsing during or immediately after her presentation. The selenium toxicity, combined with the strain, would push her system past the tipping point, and he'd have to choose. Stay silent and invisible, letting the expensive specialists continue their expensive failure while his daughter deteriorated. Or intervene publicly, diagnosing her in front of everyone, humiliating her by revealing that the janitor father she'd hidden saw what 22 board-certified physicians missed. His phone buzzed. A text from Yuki. Are you ready for tomorrow? He stared at the message. Ready to save his daughter's life while destroying any chance of reconciliation? Ready to prove that all her shame about him was justified because he'd become exactly the kind of person who caused scenes and violated boundaries? Ready to show everyone at St. Catherine's that the invisible janitor was a better diagnostician than their entire staff? As ready as I can be, he typed back. The response came immediately. My place. 20 minutes. You shouldn't be alone tonight. Marcus looked at the message for a long moment. Then he put away his cleaning supplies, clocked out, and took the bus across town to Yuki's apartment. She opened the door before he could knock, as if she'd been waiting. She'd changed out of her white coat into jeans and a soft sweater. Her hair was down. She looked younger, more vulnerable. Come in. She stepped aside. The apartment was small but thoughtfully arranged. Bookshelves lined one wall, medical texts mixed with novels. Plants clustered near the windows. A worn couch faced a window with a view of the city's glittering skyline. Where holographic advertisements painted the clouds with product placements and social status updates. I made tea, Yuki said. Or there's whiskey if you prefer. Whiskey, She poured 2 glasses and sat beside him on the couch. Close, but not touching. Giving him space to decide. Tell me what you're thinking, she said. Marcus took a drink. The burn helped. I'm thinking that tomorrow I'll save my daughter's life, and she'll hate me for it. I'm thinking that I'll prove I was right to leave the medical establishment, and they'll find a way to make me wrong anyway. I'm thinking that this job, this life I built to stay true to my principles, is about to explode, and I have no idea what comes after. You're also thinking you're too old for me. He turned to look at her. I'm thinking I'm 58 years old with a janitor's salary and a history of running away from things that hurt. You're 34 with your whole career ahead of you. Why would you want to tie yourself to my disaster? Yuki set down her glass and took his face in her hands. The gesture was tender, deliberate. Marcus. I've spent 2 years watching you see things other doctors miss. I've seen you comfort a terrified patient in broken Spanish at 3 in the morning. I've watched you teach residents with more grace and wisdom than any attending. I've seen you choose integrity over ambition every single day. She leaned closer. He could see the determination in her eyes, feel the warmth of her breath. Tomorrow you save her. Whatever happens after, we handle together. But right now, I need you to understand something. I don't want someone younger or richer or with better career prospects. I want someone real. That's you. The kiss happened slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wanted. He didn't want to. Her lips were soft, questioning. He answered by pulling her closer, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home after a long exile. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Yuki rested her forehead against his. I've wanted to do that for 2 years, she whispered. Marcus touched her face with wonder, tracing the curve of her cheek. I thought you deserved someone better. I deserve someone who sees me. Someone real. That's you. They held each other as the city lights painted patterns across the ceiling, and Marcus let himself believe, just for tonight, that tomorrow's disaster might lead somewhere worth reaching. But in the back of his mind, he was already rehearsing what he'd have to shout across a crowded ballroom to save his daughter's life, and calculating exactly how many relationships it would destroy in the process. Helena would collapse during her speech. The symptoms were too far progressed, the stress too high. And when she did, he'd have one chance to cut through the chaos of expensive specialists making expensive mistakes, one chance to be the father she'd disowned, one chance to prove that seeing people, really seeing them, mattered more than all the technology and status in the world. He pulled Yuki closer and tried not to think about the crumpled notebook in his locker, filled with months of observations and a single circled conclusion. Chronic selenium toxicity from Brandon Whitmore's supplements. Tomorrow, the invisible janitor would become very visible indeed. The St. Catherine's ballroom had been transformed into something that belonged in a museum of excess. Crystal chandeliers refracted light through holographic prisms, casting rainbow patterns across tables draped in fabric that cost more per yard than Marcus made in a week. Champagne towers rose like molecular structures, each glass precisely positioned by servo arms that adjusted for optimal visual impact. The air smelled of expensive perfume, truffle oil, and ambition. Marcus moved through it all in his Navy maintenance uniform, the embroidered name tag catching light as he refilled champagne flutes with practiced invisibility. His cart held backup bottles of Cristal, cloth napkins, and the small cleaning supplies that allowed him to erase any evidence of human messiness from this carefully curated evening. Around him, the medical elite of 3 states mingled in designer gowns embedded with status LEDs that pulsed in colors corresponding to their professional achievements. Blue for published research. Gold for surgical innovations. The occasional flash of platinum for those who'd revolutionized entire treatment protocols. He was a ghost among gods, exactly as intended. Across the room, Dr. Yuki Patel entered through the main doors. She wore a simple black dress, elegant without trying too hard, and her status LED showed a respectable array of blue and gold. But Marcus saw past the professional achievements to the way she scanned the crowd until she found him, the subtle smile that crossed her face, the deliberate path she chose that would bring her past his station in approximately 3 minutes, when she reached the champagne table where he was restocking glasses. She took one and leaned in as if examining the vintage. "You look good in uniform," she murmured. "Liar, I never lie." The confidence of a man who knows exactly who he is? Very attractive. She took a sip. "Helena's speech is in 20 minutes. Are you ready?" Marcus's hand stilled on the bottle he was holding. "As ready as I can be to watch my daughter collapse and then publicly humiliate her by diagnosing what 22 expensive specialists missed." Yuki's expression softened. "You're saving her life, while destroying any possibility of reconciliation. You don't know that, but he did know. He'd run every possible scenario in his head during the sleepless hours between leaving Yuki's apartment at dawn and reporting for his shift. Helena would collapse. He'd intervene. She'd wake up to find her janitor father had solved the medical mystery that had stumped the best minds in cardiac medicine, and she'd hate him for it. For being right. For being visible. For exposing her judgment as fundamentally flawed. "I should get back to work," he said. Yuki touched his hand briefly, a gesture hidden by the champagne tower. "I'll be watching. When it happens, I've got your back." She drifted away, and Marcus returned to his choreographed invisibility. Brandon Whitmore was holding court at a table near the stage, surrounded by pharmaceutical heirs and old money surgeons whose status LEDs blazed with every color in the spectrum. His custom tuxedo probably cost $6,000. His smile was practiced, perfect, and entirely performative. Marcus had been watching him for months now, noting the way his bonhomie increased in direct proportion to his audience's social status, the way he touched Helena possessively whenever someone important was looking. "Darling, could we get more champagne?" Brandon's voice carried across the nearby tables. Then, as if just noticing Marcus approaching, "Oh wait, Marcus. Perfect. Some cristal for the table?" The group laughed. The sound had edges. Marcus nodded politely and poured, his face carefully neutral. He'd perfected this expression 8 years ago, the look of a man who didn't hear implications. Didn't notice condescension, existed only to serve and then disappear. Dr. Rothstein, a distinguished senior surgeon whose status LEDs included a rare violet for a lifetime achievement, studied Marcus with unexpected interest. "Whitmore, is this man related to your fiancé?" Brandon waved dismissively. "Unfortunately. Father-in-law. Well, soon-to-be former father-in-law, if I have my way. Helena's embarrassed enough without him mopping floors at our wedding." The table laughed again. Marcus set down the bottle and met Dr. Rothstein's gaze. "Dr. Rothstein. Good to see you. Your patient in 403, the one you diagnosed with angina? You might want to check for thoracic outlet syndrome. I noticed her symptoms worsen when she raises her left arm." Rothstein's eyebrows rose. "How did you?" Brandon cut in, his tone indulgent in a way that made Marcus's jaw tighten. Marcus likes to play doctor. Reads medical journals in his spare time. It's charming. In a janitor, more laughter, but Rothstein looked thoughtful. Marcus caught the older surgeon's eye for one more second, saw recognition there, not of Marcus's credentials, but of something more fundamental. The doctor's ability to see patterns. He moved away before Brandon could make another joke. Across the ballroom, Helena stood with a group of young surgeons, and Marcus allowed himself to really look at her for the first time tonight. She was breathtaking in a champagne-colored gown that probably cost $15,000, her hair swept up in an elaborate style that required professional help. Her engagement ring caught light and threw tiny rainbows across nearby surfaces. She looked like everything society said success should look like. She also looked fragile. Marcus saw what no one else did, the way she gripped Brandon's arm too tightly, using him for balance. The slight tremor in her left hand. The moments where she seemed to disconnect from the conversation, her eyes going distant before she forced herself back to the present. She was deteriorating faster than his projections suggested. The speech tonight might trigger worse than a simple collapse. Brandon said something to the group, and they all laughed. Helena smiled, but Marcus saw the effort it took. Then Brandon leaned in and kissed her cheek, a possessive gesture performed for the cameras that were documenting the evening. Helena's smile never wavered, but her fingers tightened on his arm. "Did you have to be so cruel?" Her voice was quiet enough that only Brandon and, apparently, Marcus, standing 15 feet away with preternatural focus, could hear. "I wasn't cruel, I was honest. Helena, this is our night. Don't let him ruin it with his blue-collar martyr routine." Brandon's smile never faltered, his voice pitched for her ears only while his body language continued to play to the crowd. Helena forced her smile wider and turned back to the group. Marcus moved to the next table that needed service, his heart a steady drumbeat of dread. At 8:25, the lights dimmed. A holographic display materialized above the stage, showing Helena's credentials in glowing text: board-certified cardiac surgeon. 3 years with St. Catherine's. 5 published studies. Awards. Achievements. The quantified success of a life lived according to society's metrics. Brandon escorted her to the stage stairs, kissed her hand with theatrical gallantry, and returned to his table. Helena climbed the steps alone, and Marcus saw her stumble slightly on the 3rd step. She caught herself on the railing. No one else noticed. She reached the podium, and the holographic display shifted to show her face in soft focus. She looked poised, professional, perfect. "Good evening." Her voice carried across the ballroom, amplified by speakers that made it sound richer than it was. "Tonight we honor the best and brightest minds in medical science. The doctors who push boundaries, who embrace innovation, who never settle for mediocrity." Marcus positioned himself near the back wall, next to the emergency exit. Yuki had migrated to a spot with a clear sightline to both him and the stage. Their eyes met briefly. Helena continued, her speech clearly memorized, well rehearsed. She talked about breakthrough treatments, about the importance of cutting-edge technology, about surrounding yourself with excellence. But Marcus heard the slight slur in certain words. Saw the way she gripped the podium with white-knuckled intensity. "Medicine is about." She paused. The pause stretched too long. "Medicine is about." She blinked rapidly, fighting something internal. "Recovered." "Excellence." "It's about excellence. About surrounding yourself with excellence, with people who elevate you." Who? The ballroom had gone very quiet. Marcus saw Brandon shift in his seat, preparing to stand. Helena's eyes found her father in the back of the room. For 1 second, their gazes locked. He saw panic there. Confusion. The terrified recognition that something was wrong and she didn't know what. "My mother used to say." Her voice wavered. "She used to." Another pause. Longer. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Some pulled out phones, unsure if this was part of the presentation or a breakdown in progress. She said medicine was about seeing people. Really seeing them. Not their insurance plans, not their status, but her eyes rolled back. She collapsed. The ballroom erupted. Doctors surged forward from every direction, the 22 specialists who treated Helena, plus a dozen others eager to be part of whatever drama was unfolding. They converged on the stage in a chaos of contradictory commands and performative competence. Get her to the ER, full cardiac workup, no. This is neurological, emergency CT, I've been treating her for months, this is clearly stress-induced syncope. Brandon was on stage now, trying to take charge, but his panic was visible beneath the bravado. Someone do something. She needs, he didn't actually know what she needed. None of them did. Marcus set down his tray of empty glasses. The motion was deliberate, almost ceremonial. He could feel Yuki watching him. Feel the weight of the decision he was about to make. He walked forward. The crowd parted without thinking about it, the automatic deference people gave to purposeful movement. He climbed the stage stairs, and the specialists finally noticed him. Dr. Brennan, a neurologist with platinum status LEDs, tried to block him. "Sir, you need to step away." Marcus ignored him. He knelt beside Helena, checking her pulse at her wrist and then her neck. The rhythm was irregular but not critical. He lifted one eyelid, checking pupil response. Sluggish. He noted the slight garlic smell on her breath, consistent with selenium toxicity. How long has she been on selenium supplements? His voice carried across the suddenly quiet stage. Brandon turned, his face twisted with confusion and anger. What? That's irrelevant. Marcus stood, and the notebook came out of his pocket. Crumpled, water-stained, filled with months of observations written in cramped handwriting during stolen moments in supply closets and empty patient rooms. His voice carried across the ballroom, clear and certain. Helena, stop taking the supplements Brandon gives you. 500 people stared. The moment crystallized, sharp and irrevocable. Dr. Rothstein pushed through the crowd. Marcus, what are you talking about? Marcus opened the notebook. The pages were covered in timelines, symptom correlations, lab value trends. I've been tracking her symptoms for 6 months. They started exactly when Dr. Whitmore moved in with her. They worsen after breakfast, when he makes her his health shakes. Every test you've all run shows borderline elevated selenium. Not enough to flag as acute toxicity, but a slow, chronic poisoning. He showed them the pages. The meticulous documentation. The pattern that was invisible if you were looking at individual tests but obvious if you were looking at a patient over time. Selenium toxicity presents as neurological symptoms including confusion and cognitive decline, cardiac arrhythmias, fatigue, hair loss, brittle nails. None of you saw it because you were looking for exotic diagnoses. You were ordering million-dollar genetic tests while poisoning her with supplements. Brandon's face had gone red. That's absurd. My family's company has the highest quality. Dr. Yuki Patel stepped onto the stage, her phone extended. Actually, I tested the supplements from Helena's purse this afternoon. Marcus told me his theory yesterday. The selenium content is 3 times the safe daily limit. She's been taking double doses for months. She transmitted the lab results to the ballroom's holographic display system. The data materialized in the air above the stage, irrefutable and damning. The crowd erupted in whispers. Phones emerged everywhere, cameras capturing everything. Dr. Rothstein looked from the data to Marcus to the notebook. How did you figure this out when 22 specialists missed it? Marcus helped Helena into recovery position as she began to stir. Because I actually looked at her. I didn't order tests to cover my ass or pad a bill. I watched. I listened. I connected dots. It's what we're supposed to do, what your generation has forgotten in favor of technology and status. Brandon's voice rose, desperate and furious. You're a janitor. You have no credentials, no authority. Yuki moved to stand beside Marcus, and took his hand. The gesture was bold. Public, deliberate. He's Dr. Marcus Chen. 20 years in emergency medicine. And he's the best diagnostician in this hospital, whether he wears scrubs or a maintenance uniform. The whispers became a roar. Helena's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, confused. Her gaze found her father's face, and something crossed her expression, recognition that went deeper than the immediate moment. She was seeing him, really seeing him, for the first time in 8 years. "Daddy?" Her voice was small, broken. A child's voice. Marcus felt something crack in his chest. He smoothed her hair back from her forehead, a gesture from her childhood. "I'm here, sweetheart. You're going to be okay." The paramedics arrived then, summoned by someone in the chaos. They loaded Helena onto a gurney, and Marcus stayed beside her, ignoring the doctors who tried to assert authority, ignoring Brandon's furious protests, ignoring everything except his daughter's hand in his. 2 hours later, Helena lay in a hospital bed in the emergency department, hooked to monitors that beeped steadily. For fluids ran through a line in her arm. Her face was pale but peaceful, the crisis managed with activated charcoal and chelation therapy. Marcus sat in the chair beside her bed. Brandon had been escorted out by security after attempting to override the medical team's decisions. The nurses had quietly informed Marcus that Brandon's pharmaceutical company was already facing questions from regulatory boards. Helena's eyes opened fully, and she turned her head to look at him. "You saved my life," Marcus shrugged. "I'm your father. It's what I do." Tears slid down her cheeks. "I was so ashamed of you. I thought you were a quitter. A failure. I thought you gave up on medicine because you couldn't hack it." He took her hand, feeling the pulse point at her wrist. "Strong and steady now. I gave up on a system that made me complicit in valuing money over people. Your mother died because expensive doctors wouldn't listen to a patient. I couldn't be part of that anymore. So I found a different way to be useful. You became invisible." She was crying harder now, the words coming between sobs. "I became present. I see every patient in this hospital, not as cases or paychecks, but as people. The nurses know I'll help without judgment. The residents ask me questions they're afraid to ask attendings. And I sleep at night because I'm helping for the right reasons." Helena turned her face into the pillow. "I'm so sorry. I became everything you taught me not to be. I chose status over substance, image over integrity. I almost married a man who was literally poisoning me, and I was too proud to see it. You can choose differently now. You don't have to rebuild the same life." She looked at him again, her eyes red but clear. "Will you forgive me? For 8 years of cruelty?" Marcus kissed her forehead, the way he had when she was small. "Already forgiven. You're my daughter." That never changed. A soft knock on the doorframe made them both look up. Yuki stood there with 2 cups of coffee, hesitant, clearly unsure if she was intruding. Helena saw the way her father's face transformed when he saw Yuki. The way Yuki's expression mirrored his. Something passed between them that was beyond words, an intimacy earned through time and understanding. A small smile touched Helena's lips despite everything. "Dad, is she?" Marcus actually looked shy. "This is Dr. Patel. Yuki. We've been talking." For a while, Yuki entered the room, warm but professional. She handed Marcus his coffee and stood beside his chair. "Your father is the reason I didn't misdiagnose 3 patients this year. He's brilliant and kind. And if you're wondering if I'm too young for him, or if it's inappropriate, or if it makes sense, I'll tell you what I told him. I don't care about any of that." Helena's smile widened, genuine despite her exhaustion. "Then I hope he's smart enough not to let you go. Because if he taught me anything tonight, it's that real value doesn't come from status or age or money. It comes from seeing people clearly, She looked at her father, truly looked at him, and saw not the embarrassing janitor or the disappointing failure, but the man who'd chosen integrity over image. Compassion over ambition, truth over comfort. The man who'd saved her life while she'd been busy being ashamed of him. "I want to be like you," she whispered. "When I get better. I want to be the kind of doctor you are." Marcus squeezed her hand. "Then we'll figure it out together." Yuki's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then at Marcus. "The hospital board wants to see you. Tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. Helena's eyes widened with alarm. "Are they going to fire you?" Marcus shrugged. "Probably. HIPAA violations. Working outside my scope. Causing a scene at their biggest fundraiser of the year," but Yuki was smiling. "I don't think so. Dr. Rothstein has been calling board members all night." You might be surprised. The next morning proved her right in ways Marcus couldn't have predicted. 6 months had passed since the gala, and Marcus Chen stood at the front of a conference room that now bore a nameplate reading Chen Patel Center for Humanistic Medicine. The room was packed, 50 medical students, residents, and even attending physicians squeezed into seats designed for 30. Some stood along the walls. Others sat cross-legged on the floor. They'd all heard the story. The janitor who'd outsmarted 22 specialists. The viral moment that had become a case study in medical humility. Marcus wore his compromise uniform, maintenance pants with a physician's white coat over the top. The juxtaposition had bothered him at first, but Yuki had convinced him it was perfect. A visible reminder that observation and compassion weren't bound by job titles. Dr. Yuki Patel stood beside him, her own white coat crisp and professional. But Marcus saw the small smile playing at her lips, the way her shoulder brushed his when she moved. 6 months of working together had deepened what had started in midnight lab consultations into something that felt inevitable and right. "Okay, first lesson." Marcus's voice carried easily now. He'd gotten used to teaching again, though it still felt strange to have people listening on purpose. "What's the most expensive piece of diagnostic equipment in this hospital?" An eager resident near the front raised his hand. "The new MRI machine? $3 million? Wrong. It's your eyes, ears, and empathy. And they're free." A few students exchanged glances. One whispered something to her neighbor. Marcus caught the word corny but didn't react. He pulled up a holographic case file that materialized in the air between him and the class. A patient with mysterious symptoms, pages of test results, no clear diagnosis. "Mrs. Chen and I are going to walk you through a real case from last week. Before you order a single test, what do you do?" Another resident spoke up. "Full physical exam." Before that, the door opened quietly, and Helena slipped in. She took a seat among the students, notebook in hand. She was back from medical leave, but different. Her hair was pulled into a simple ponytail. She wore scrubs instead of designer clothes. The status LEDs on her coat showed her credentials, but she'd disabled the brightness settings so they barely glowed. Marcus's face transformed when he saw her. Pride mixed with something deeper, the joy of witnessing someone choose authenticity over image. Helena raised her hand. "You talk to them. You ask what they've noticed. You listen." "Exactly." Marcus gestured toward the door. "Now let's go see this patient together. All of you. We'll practice observation." The group followed him through the corridor. A strange parade of white coats and eager faces. Marcus led them to a private room where Mrs. Rodriguez sat in bed, looking small against the pillows. She was 67, admitted 3 days ago with unexplained chronic pain. 15 specialists had examined her. The tests were all inconclusive. Marcus approached her bed with the gentleness that came from decades of practice. "Mrs. Rodriguez, These are students learning how to be better doctors. Would you mind if we talked about what's been happening? She nodded, her eyes wary but kind. Tell me about your life. What changed 6 months ago? Mrs. Rodriguez's expression shifted. My husband died. We were married 43 years. Now I live alone. I try to keep busy, but... She trailed off, her left hand beginning to tremble slightly. Marcus glanced at the students. Watch her left hand when she talks about being alone. They all turned their attention to Mrs. Rodriguez's hands. The left one trembled, then stilled when she reached over and held it with her right. Anyone? Marcus asked. Yuki stepped forward slightly. Anxiety manifesting physically. But also, Mrs. Rodriguez, do you have pain when you hold your right hand like that? Mrs. Rodriguez looked surprised. No. How did you know? Helena spoke from the back of the group, her voice thoughtful. Because you're self-soothing. The pressure helps. This isn't just anxiety, this is complex grief with somatic symptoms. She needs therapy, community support, maybe occupational therapy to rebuild connection. Not more scans. Marcus felt pride swell in his chest. 10 minutes of observation. No tests. That's medicine, the students were riveted. This was teaching they'd never experienced in traditional rotations, human, compassionate, effective. As they filed out of the room, Marcus heard them talking in excited whispers. Mrs. Rodriguez caught his hand. Thank you for seeing me. Really seeing me, that's what we're here for, he said simply. That evening, Marcus let himself into his apartment to find it had continued its gradual transformation. Yuki's books now took up 2 shelves, mixed with his medical texts. Her plants clustered near the windows. A framed photo of them at the hospital charity run sat on the table. They weren't officially living together, but the boundaries had blurred months ago. He found her in the kitchen, stirring pasta sauce and humming off-key. She'd changed out of her white coat into jeans and a soft sweater. Her hair was down, curling slightly at the ends. Good day, she asked without turning around. The Rodriguez case. Helena nailed the diagnosis in under 10 minutes. She's learning from the best. Yuki glanced over her shoulder, and the look she gave him made his pulse quicken even after 6 months. Also, the board called. They want to talk to us tomorrow. Marcus set down his bag and moved to stand beside her, taking over the stirring. About what? They asked me to head the new patient-centered diagnostics department. Full professor track. He stopped stirring. Turned to look at her fully. Yuki, that's incredible. You absolutely should. I said yes. She met his gaze steadily. But only if you're co-director, that's your career. You don't need to tie it to. She stepped close, taking his face in her hands. The gesture was tender but firm. Listen to me. For 2 years, I've watched you revolutionize how we think about medicine from a janitor's cart. You're the smartest, kindest, most principled person I know. I don't want to build something without you. Not because I need you professionally, but because I love you. It was the first time she'd said it directly. The words hung in the air between them, clear and irrevocable. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I'm 58 years old. I drive a car that makes embarrassing noises. I own 7 shirts total. Yuki kissed him, cutting off the self-deprecation. When she pulled back, her eyes were fierce. And you're the sexiest man I've ever met. Do you know what's attractive? Integrity. Intelligence. Humility. You have all of that. So stop telling me I should want someone younger or richer or with a better car. Marcus kissed her back, deeper this time, his hands finding her waist. I love you too. I've loved you since you asked my opinion on that endothelial inflammation and actually listened to the answer. They kissed with real passion, not the performative kind that sought an audience, but the earned intimacy of two people who saw each other clearly and chose each other anyway. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Yuki's smile was wicked. So, co-directors? Co-directors. But I'm keeping my janitor shifts, Yuki laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. I wouldn't expect anything less. She pulled him into a dance that had no music, just the sound of the sauce bubbling on the stove and their own quiet happiness. 3 months later, Helena walked into her free clinic to find her father already there. It was evening, and the small converted storefront was lit by harsh fluorescent lights that buzzed slightly. The waiting room held a mix of people, homeless individuals, undocumented workers, families who couldn't afford regular health care. All of them looked at Helena with a trust she was still learning to deserve. Marcus had stopped by after finishing his janitorial shift at St. Catherine's. He still wore the navy uniform, though now his white coat hung over one arm. Helena found him in the treatment room, watching as she stitched up a homeless man's wound with patient, gentle precision. Hey Dad. Meet Jorge. Needs antibiotics but couldn't afford the ER. Jorge looked up at Marcus with the weathered face of someone who'd lived hard. Your daughter's an angel, man, Marcus smiled. She's learning. Slowly, after Jorge left with prescriptions Helena would pay for herself, father and daughter sat on the clinic's front steps. The city hummed around them, cars passing, distant sirens, the electric buzz of holographic advertisements painting the sky. Helena leaned back against the brick wall, exhausted but satisfied. Brandon called yesterday. Marcus tensed slightly. What did he want? To apologize, actually. He's in therapy, working on his entitlement issues. Lost his medical license, but he's teaching high school biology now. Says it's humbling. Helena picked at a loose thread on her scrubs. I told him I hoped he finds peace. That's generous of you, I learned it from you. You could have hated me for 8 years of cruelty. Instead, you saved my life and forgave me instantly. Marcus looked at his daughter, this woman who'd rejected him, then almost died, then chosen to rebuild herself from scratch. You're my daughter. That's what love does. Helena took his hand, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that still felt new and precious. I have something to ask you. I'm planning a fundraiser for the free clinic. Nothing fancy, just a community event. But I'd like you to speak. Tell your story. Show people that medicine can be different. I'm not good at public speaking, you're excellent at it. You just don't perform. You teach. There's a difference. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and Marcus remembered her doing this as a child. The circle was healing, slowly but surely. 6 months after that conversation, on a warm afternoon in late spring, Marcus Chin stood in a community garden wearing a suit that wasn't expensive but fit well. Around him, 200 people gathered among flowering plants and strings of lights that would glow once evening fell. These weren't the medical elite. These were nurses and janitors, patients he'd helped, medical students from his classes, Yuki's extended family, volunteers from Helena's free clinic. Real community, built on connection rather than status. Yuki was radiant in a simple dress, her hair adorned with small flowers. She looked nervous and happy and absolutely beautiful. Helena walked Yuki down the makeshift aisle between folding chairs. The role reversal felt perfect, the daughter giving away her father's bride. When they reached the front, Helena kissed Yuki's cheek, whispered something that made Yuki laugh, then took her seat in the front row. Marcus stepped forward, and Yuki's hand found his. The officiant, one of the nurses from St. Catherine's who'd become ordained specifically for this occasion, smiled at them both. The couple has prepared their own vows. Yuki went first, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. Marcus, you taught me that the measure of a person isn't their title or their bank account. It's their capacity to see others clearly and love them anyway. You see me, not Dr. Patel, not the accomplished surgeon, but Yuki. The woman who drinks too much coffee and cries at cat videos and wants to change medicine one patient at a time. You see me, and you love what you see. That's everything. Marcus had to clear his throat before he could speak. Yuki, you saw past the janitor's uniform to the doctor I still was in my heart. You didn't need me to be successful or prestigious. You just needed me to be honest. You taught me that second chances exist, that love isn't about age or timing, and that two people who share values can build something beautiful. I promise to see you clearly, every day, for the rest of our lives. They kissed, and the small crowd erupted in genuine celebration. Not polite applause, but real joy. The reception was potluck, spread across picnic tables under string lights. Someone had brought a portable speaker playing old songs. Dr. Rothstein danced awkwardly with his wife, his status LEDs dimmed in deference to the casual setting. The hospital board members who'd attended looked visibly out of their element but were trying, sampling potato salad and making conversation with janitors. Helena stood to give a toast, her glass of cheap champagne catching the light. A year ago, I was dying. Not just from selenium toxicity, but from a life built on false values. I chose status over substance, image over integrity. My father saved my life twice, once by diagnosing my poisoning, and once by showing me a different way to live. She looked at Marcus and Yuki, tears gathering in her eyes. These two people, a janitor doctor and the surgeon who loved him for the right reasons, they're proof that real success isn't measured in money or prestige. It's measured in how many lives you touch, how honestly you love, how courageously you choose values over vanity. Dad, Yuki, thank you for showing me what matters. May your marriage be as real and beautiful as your love. Everyone cheered. Marcus pulled Helena into a hug, then Yuki joined, and it was a perfect moment of chosen family. Later, when the party had mellowed into soft conversation and slow music, Marcus and Yuki slow danced under the string lights. She fit perfectly against him, her head on his chest, his arms around her waist. Mrs. Chen. I'm Mrs. Chen now, Marcus smiled against her hair. Dr. Chen Patel. We agreed on hyphenation. Yuki looked up at him, and the desire in her eyes made his breath catch. Take me home, husband. The party, she kissed his neck, deliberate and promising. Can continue without us. I've been waiting all day to be alone with you. To finally, officially, completely be yours. We should say goodbye. Another kiss, just below his ear. Or we could slip away. Let them celebrate. While we celebrate privately, the heat between them was palpable, earned through years of friendship, respect, and now love. Not gratuitous, but the natural passion of two people who'd waited, who'd built something real. Marcus surrendered, desire clear in his eyes. You're impossible to resist. Yuki took his hand, leading him toward the garden exit. Good. Don't try. They slipped away, and Helena watched them go with a smile that held only genuine happiness for her father's joy. 1 year after the wedding, Marcus stood in front of a conference room that now officially bore both his and Yuki's names. The Chen Patel Center for Humanistic Medicine had become legendary. Medical students competed for spots in their program. Other hospitals were asking for consultations on how to implement similar approaches. Today, Helena was guest lecturing. She stood beside her father, sharing her journey from status-obsessed surgeon to patient-centered physician. Her voice was steady, honest, vulnerable. I almost died chasing an image of success that meant nothing. My father saved me by remembering what medicine is actually for, seeing people, helping them, being honest. A young medical student raised her hand. Dr. Chen, don't you worry that this approach, spending more time with patients, focusing on observation over tests, will hurt your career? Won't you make less money, get fewer publications? Helena smiled. I make less money than I used to. My penthouse is gone. I drive a 12-year-old Civic. And I've never been happier or more fulfilled. Because I go home knowing I helped people, really helped them. Not their insurance companies, not my ego. Them, Marcus added, the system rewards the wrong things. But you don't have to play by those rules. You can choose differently. It's harder, but it's worth it. Yuki stepped forward, her hand finding Marcus's naturally. And you'll be part of a community of physicians who are trying to change medicine from the inside. You won't be alone. The room erupted in applause. Marcus looked around at the eager faces, these students who wanted to believe that medicine could be different, that integrity and compassion could coexist with professional success. He'd given them permission to try. That evening, Marcus and Yuki hosted dinner at their home. The apartment had expanded, they'd moved to a modest 2-bedroom that could accommodate gatherings. The table was crowded with people who'd become family. Helena and her boyfriend Miguel, a social worker who treated her like a partner rather than a trophy. Nurses from St. Catherine's. A few of Marcus's best students. Mrs. Rodriguez from the teaching case, now thriving and volunteering at Helena's clinic. They toasted accomplishments. The Chimpatel Center was expanding to 3 more hospitals. Helena's free clinic was growing, receiving grants from foundations that valued community medicine. Brandon's pharmaceutical company had implemented strict safety testing after the lawsuits, turning a scandal into systemic change. Dr. Rothstein had even implemented Shadow a Janitor Week for all new residents, a program designed to teach humility and observation. Helena raised her glass. To my father, who showed us all that success isn't about what you have, but about who you are and how you treat people, Yuki added, and to everyone here, for choosing values over vanity. Marcus felt emotion thicken his throat. To second chances. To seeing people clearly. To love that's earned, not performed. They clinked glasses, and the sound was like small bells ringing. The camera of memory captured this moment, diverse faces, real laughter, a modest home rich with love. Later, after everyone had left and Yuki had fallen asleep against him on the couch, Marcus thought about his wife Sarah. She would have loved Yuki. Would have been proud of Helena's transformation. Would have approved of this life he'd built from the rubble of grief and principle. 2 a.m. found Marcus back at St. Catherine's in his janitor's uniform, pushing his cart through empty corridors. His white coat hung on the cart now, a symbol of both roles. He was heading home after an evening shift when he saw an elderly patient wandering the hallway, confused and frightened. Marcus set down his cart and approached slowly. "Sir, are you okay?" The man looked at him with clouded eyes. "I can't find. It's all right. Let's figure it out together." Marcus sat with him on a nearby bench, patient and unhurried. After a few gentle questions, he realized the man needed the bathroom but was too disoriented to find it. Marcus helped him there, waited outside, then walked him back to his room. A doctor passed them in the hallway, head down, absorbed in something on a tablet. Never looked up. Never noticed. Marcus saw. He helped. He was present. And that, in the end, was everything.